Hi and hello, Watchmans, and welcome to another edition of The Real Time Show with me, your friendly neighborhood watchmaker, Rob Nuds, our resident provocateur, David Vaucher, and partner in the limited edition, Oliver Al-Falah. Good to hear from you, Oliver. I'm glad you made it into the studio after bearing London traffic once more. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me.
It is our pleasure. Obviously, we know the limited edition very well. We're good friends with Pietro, especially. I work with him directly at Arcanaut, but we've never actually met in person, Oliver. So where have you been hiding? How is it that we haven't crossed paths just yet?
It's probably the easiest thing, isn't it? Just to stay in the background and kind of to try and keep yourself sane by not getting involved in too many different launches, etc. But at the limited edition, obviously we have a number of events, and so I do get the opportunity to go to those and meet many of our collectors. And so the rest of the time, actually, I work in the background along with all the other great people we have at the limited edition, just to continuously improve and make us better, and ultimately serve our ever-growing, amazing community of watch collectors and indeed manufacturers, much like Arcanaut, which I'm sure you know we are big fans of.
That was a very polished answer. You can come back on the show anytime you want. You're not that much in the background, though. I see you everywhere on the YouTube channel. I see you popping up all over the place. I mean, you've got a media sensibility about you. Was that your desire when you joined the limited edition as a partner? Did you want to be in front of a camera, or did they just realize that you had a talent for it, so they stuck you there?
Well, that very kind of you to say. So no, that wasn't the original plan. The original plan was for me to come on board initially purely from a business perspective. And also because of the massive respect and friendship I have built with Pietro Tomaya over the years. That originally started as a result of me buying watches through the limited edition. The first of which was an HYT Skull Green Eye, all the way back in 2016 or 2017, something like that. But we had also always really wanted to try and increase the following of independent watches on YouTube. And we came up with the idea of starting the Watch Collector to really broaden those horizons. So beginning of 2023, and then only started in around May that year. So it was the genesis was relatively quick, but honestly, the reaction we've had has just been amazing.
What a way to introduce yourself to Pietro, buying an HYT Skull. I mean, that's a niche piece. I've had them on my wrist. I'm a big fan of the brand. You probably, well, I don't know if you know that, but I'm a huge fan of the brand. Adore HYT. Great choice. Do you still have it in your collection? That's a big question.
I actually don't have that piece still in my collection, but I do have an HYT 80 unique piece.
Oh, wow.
That was made for me when I did the Gumball 3000 in 2019.
Gumball 3000. Didn't Arnold & Son used to sponsor that back in the day?
They may well have had something to do with it. There have been a couple of different brands that have done pieces with the Gumball.
I think I'm thinking of Armin Strom, actually. I'm thinking Armin Strom. Was it Armin Strom? David, do you remember this Gumball 3000 special editions? I'm sure one of those brands did. It began with an A.
No, I am typing furiously now though to find the answer.
Maybe that's a very niche reference from early in my journalistic career. I do remember covering a special edition at one point. I'm going to find it and bring it up later. So, a unique piece, HYT. What else do we have in the collection, Oliver? Because if you're buying HYTs, then the possibilities are endless.
Well, I think, like most people, they start their journey with the more well-known brands. So, my first ever piece was actually bought for me as a 25th birthday gift. And that was the Omega Seamaster 300 chronograph. My parents bought that for me. I'd wanted it for about 10 years. Obviously didn't have the money, even though at that time it was around about £1,800 compared to the four to £5,000 it is now. So that was the very first of Swiss luxury watch, I would say, that got added. And then since then, what else? Rolex Hulk, a couple of Pateks, Chapek, Laurent Ferrier, obviously the HYT I've mentioned, Bulgari.
So just a bunch of micro brands then.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's quite varied, and even a random Eterna Contiki which I dig out every now and then, just to have some fun. That's what it's all about.
So David's done a great service for us here. He's been doing some research while we were chatting about your collection. He found out it was Armin Strom I was thinking of. And if you go back, you can even find my article from May 30th, 2015. Don't judge me. I was straight new into writing at that point. And also he says Ulysse Nardin more recently sponsored the Gumball 3000. Who'd have thought the Gumball 3000 would be such a ripe area for watch brands to collaborate?
Well, when I approached HYT with Pietro, honestly, they really embraced it, because for them it opened opportunities, it opened imagination, and HYT is such a forward-thinking brand. For me, it epitomizes what independent watchmaking is all about. There aren't. I don't think. Let's face it. There are that many brands that can genuinely say they've come up with a new way of telling the time. But they, in my view, just totally smashed it. And no, they were amazing to work with, and the piece itself just came out just amazing. So yeah, look, watches, cars, it's a well-worn path, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? But I mean, that's a strangely specific event to have had at least 3 major collaborators, and they are major. Do you think that brands are attracted to the Gumball 3000 specifically because of the clientele it attracts, like the demographic they know they're going to be able to speak to by making those watches?
No doubt. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because of course, of those 3, I mean, Armin Strom is a great brand. Of course, we've been associated with them at the limited edition for many years now. We love them. HYT is even smaller than them, and really, really specific. But everyone that I spoke to, certainly on the rally and afterwards, if they hadn't heard of HYT, they just loved. They just couldn't get enough of the idea behind what they were trying to achieve. And certainly, I think it helped broaden people's appreciation for what HYT was actually doing. And what I appreciate they've started to do now is really kind of broaden the way that they're presenting their pieces. So it's not just about the liquid mechanics, which of course is amazing, but the fact that you've now got annual calendars, you've got moon phase. These kind of complications, I think serious collectors were really looking for, and now they're starting to serve them. And of course, their triple access tourbillon is just out of this world.
So I think it's pretty easy to break HYT into several eras. Now, obviously, it's been bankrupt a couple of times, come back to life from the death. So those are clear marker points in the company's history and evolution. But stylistically, there's another chapter which I think should be distinct from the previous ones. You've got the original launch, where you've got like the H1, the H2, and then of course there was the H3, which doesn't get much pop at all in that original one. That's a bit of an anomaly. Leave that out for a second. But then there was a second stylistic era with the H0, this lugless, more sculptural take on it. Then there was the Cerato era, and now we've got the modern Vahe era, as it were, with the new T1 and the S1 and S2 and whatnot. Which is your favorite era? Because I mean, you've got one from the H0 era, which I think is the most obscure of the 4, if I'm defining them as such. But what's your take on it? Is that your favorite period of time? Is that where you think that they really put the liquid mechanics front and center and embraced who they really were?
It is my favorite. I love the wearability of it. Even though, testing me now, I think it's a 47mm case. It doesn't wear like that at all because, as you rightly say, it's completely lugless. Even though obviously you've got the movement, the mechanics, and obviously all that material, it's also not that heavy either. So it's much more wearable than you think. And although it doesn't necessarily get as much wrist time as I would like it to, it's absolutely up there with one of my favorite pieces ever. But bringing it forward to the current day, as I mentioned, what I love about what they're doing now is, as I said, they're adding to the formula. Because really, I mean, I ultimately, as someone who has kind of been involved with the HYT for quite a while and had the pleasure of going to Neuchâtel and visiting them, I want them to succeed. And what I want them to do is really welcome collectors to have a reason to have more than one HYT, because realistically they make such a small number of pieces a year that they building that loyal following is really important. And so whilst the technology is amazing, to a certain extent, once you have an HYT and you've got that technology, then you kind of scratch the itch. Whereas what they've done now in terms of adding a sort of a tourbillon or annual calendar or moon phase, they've really started to cater for what I think probably serious collectors would like, which is, okay, it's not just one reason to have an HYT, it's multiple now. So now I would say is that was my favorite time for the brand. But overall, yes, my H0 I think is just a timeless design, and as I said, extremely wearable.
It's actually almost 49 millimeters, by the way. Those ones are absolute chunks. So your testimony that it's wearable regardless is very important for listeners to hear. David, take it away.
Yeah, no, I just want to pivot a little bit to the business side. That's usually the topic I like to talk about in these interviews. And you'd mentioned something about HYT having to basically fight for every sale. And the watch business now is not doing so well, with the exception of the higher end. And I think the impression that I always get when I'm talking about the high end is that it's the really high end, and that buying something like an HYT would just be like me running out to the cafe and buying a coffee. But what you're describing actually seems to go against that. So could you provide a little bit of commentary on maybe what the reality actually is like for some of these high-end brands, and what they have to do to keep convincing people to stay with them?
I think I can probably answer that question relatively straightforwardly, and that is this. At the time, when I spoke to Pietro about the original skull green eye that I had, if I remember correctly, it was around about 50,000. And the straightforward question, this was right at the very beginning of my kind of journey into independent horology. So, I wasn't really au fait with the general way that things like that were created. All I knew is that I'd seen this piece and I just thought it was absolutely amazing. And I said, well, look, so you can spend 50,000 on this, or you can go and spend 50,000 on the Patek. What can you say to me as to how that's going to convince me to put my money there as opposed to elsewhere? And moving on to that, I said, well, okay, in addition, it's a very small company. It's only started a couple of years ago. What happens if, God forbid, something were to go wrong? What happens if the company were no longer alive? Of course, as you correctly pointed out, Rob, that did happen, and they phoenixed, and I know there were issues with certain shareholders, and that was really the reason as to why the company had to do what it did structurally. But so who's going to look after servicing? Because not any watchmaker can go in and deal with this kind of movement. And what really sort of set my mind at rest was the fact that he said, well, look, if you bought it through us, then we will take care of it. But specifically in relation to HYT, of course, they have Pressiflex behind them. And that's where the technology comes from, and that has a very strong footing. So if you are to buy the piece or any other HYT, then you have that assurance that basically there's almost a technological pharmaceutical company behind it that will ensure that you are taken care of. And that of course, Pietro is superb in terms of the customer service, but that really kind of assuaged any kind of fear that I had that I would be caught my trousers down in the future. But I think realistically, that's probably the biggest thing, isn't it? If you haven't already decided to take the leap into independent watchmaking, most people will probably ask the question, well, why would I put my money into something that doesn't have the heritage that I'm, to a certain extent, almost taking a punt on? And look, I made that decision, and honestly, I can't say that I regret it for 1 second. I love the fact that I don't think there's another watch in my collection that is a better conversation starter. That really kind of gets I suppose, for want of a better phrase, the juices flowing between watch fans, because you just never see pieces like that, and that's kind of the point of these things, isn't it? We can all appreciate the big brands, of course, they do amazing things, but when you see something that is completely out of the norm on someone's wrist, as far as I'm concerned, it's an automatic win, and I just want to talk to them about it. So that was ultimately, I think, the real driver for me, and as I said, genuinely haven't looked back since.
Yeah, definitely good value. We've had juices flowing, trousers down, and the word assuaged for the first time in 268 episodes of the Real Time Show. You can come back. This is great. So I can see why Pietro likes you, but how did your relationship with Pietro develop from client, provider to partner? What was the conversation? When did you realize you were going to take that step to add to the limited edition to your portfolio of activities?
Good question, because I don't think there was any particular kind of, BC AD moment. It was just, we just started to get on very well. That's the only way I can describe it. We're genuinely friends first and foremost. And in terms of what I do sort of on a day-to-day basis, which generally involves trying to pretend that I know what I'm talking about in terms of how businesses need to run and what they need to do in terms of their own sort of internal policies and work within regulations. We just started talking, and I think I sensed that perhaps he needed some help with the limited edition, because especially since COVID, he and the team have done an amazing job. And there just comes a point where you just don't have sufficient capacity to keep that flow going. And so we carried on talking, and he was looking for additional help, and the issue over shareholding came up. And why, from my view, why would I not want to be involved in a company that is, in my view, at the absolute apex of limited independent watchmaking, certainly within the UK. Amazing range of brands, customer service level that I've rarely seen, and I've had the very fortunate position of buying watches from various different, let's say, more well-known authorized distributors. So it was just sort of an ongoing process, and ultimately a very easy decision to make.
And do you think that business case would have looked differently if you were asked to make the same choice today? I mean, again, I'm going back to just the general health of the watch industry. Rob and I were talking when, or prior to you arriving in the virtual green room, that the Swiss franc is very high now compared to what it was. There's tariffs. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on. So would that business case look differently if you were offered the same opportunity today as when you were, when you actually made the decision?
No. It wouldn't have changed my decision at all. Actually, at the moment is a really exciting time to be part of the limited edition. The fact that we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year is amazing, and as you say, specifically when over the last couple of years it has been a really tough market. But having said all of that, yes, it's been a tough market, particularly for the hyped pieces. But we've seen a continuous need and want for independent watches, and that's across the price range, from the more entry level pieces all the way up to the let's call them kind of house price pieces. It hasn't really stopped for us, and that's the truth about it. And I think the reason why is, of course, as a business, we're here to, serve our customers and sell watches and ultimately make money. But the issue really for me was about how we approach that. And it's what I appreciated and always respected about Pietro was it was never about the push. It was always about the pull. And how that pull was done was simply by getting names out there, educating the community on the kind of brands that they wouldn't have I guess the platform to get that kind of notoriety in the first place, and allowing people to make their own decisions, and ultimately if they do, then fantastic, we're there to support them. So the use case for me, as I said, would not have changed. really fundamentally it's based on those values. And the fact that we've got to 10 years now, all thanks to Petri starting in 2015, and the team behind, there are some exciting things that are in the pipeline.
Great. So actually, I've got a follow-up. Well, I say it's tangential, but I want to talk just customer demographics and choices, because as I'm looking at the website under brands, there is a segmentation where you've got independents and you've got micro brands. And within the community, there's been a discussion of the place of micro brands, the type of buyer that buys a micro brand. And there is a hypothesis that I don't think we've settled on, which is that first-time buyers do not buy micro brands. And that's important when you look at how the big group brands are doing. And it's got all sorts of effects. But I guess what I'm getting at is, what does the typical buyer look like for the limited edition? And what is the space of micro brands on their watch journey? Is it, or can it be a first purchase, or is it farther along in their watch journey?
I think probably on balance, you're right in that, if you are looking for your first Swiss luxury watch, then the chances that you're going to go for something super obscure is low. But I'm looking at the brands that we've got on our website under the micro brand, and there are a couple that immediately jump up. I mean, I love them all, but in fact, actually, we've got a couple of very cool limited pieces with Ophion. We did the Gilt Spectre, and we've got another one coming up too. But a perfect example to me is Gaga. When the Cinquanta and the Bauhaus were released a year or so ago, okay, I'm relatively seasoned, I suppose you might say, but I fell in love with it straight away. And for me, the design was just almost perfect. I love the way that it actually tried to introduce a complication to the dial. That price point was just on the money. The whole image around it, personally, maybe I got sold, but I got suckered into it completely. And actually, I know that both those pieces have done very well, particularly the Cinquanta. And a few of those did go to people who it was their first luxury watch. And again, they bought into the design, they bought into the story behind that. So, whilst I think, yes, you're most likely right for the most people that they're not prepared to take the punt, that if it's thoughtful and I guess thought-provoking, then I think people will do it. Atelier Wen is another one. They're doing amazing things with their integrated bracelets. Very, very cool. Sartre Biard, are giving people the kind of options for bespoke pieces that once was probably the preserve of the guys spending 200,000-300,000. And the fact that I think most people will think, how on earth can I completely spec a watch for less than 5,000 Swiss francs? That doesn't make any sense. Plus with the level of design that comes to it. So I think the tide is changing. Actually, I think more people are delving into the world, and once they realize just the general cost effectiveness, frankly, of choosing an independent piece over the more well-known brands, then it's a great gateway.
This is bizarre. Both David and I were thinking about the independent and the micro brand section on your website at the same time. I had a different question which pertains to the definitional aspect of micro and independent brands. I'm looking at what you've got in each list. I'm very pleased to see Argonaut listed as independent rather than micro, because some people refer to it as a micro. But I'm looking at some of the micros and I'm questioning whether or not I'd define them as such. Like Tatima is one that sticks out to me as almost a heritage brand. So I am curious as to how that split has been made in your mind, because it is true, I think, to say, or fair to say at least, that micro brand can sometimes be used as a bit of a dirty word in the independent space, especially a sort of derogatory term. I look at the brands you've got on this website, and I'm not sure I really see any that I would comfortably define as micro rather than small independent. I mean, you've got Gaga is a great example. There's nothing off the shelf about a Gaga, bar the movement maybe, but there's nothing that you'd expect to see anywhere else. It's all design. Same thing with Zeitwinkel. I mean, they make their own movements and they're in the microbrand section. So what's the thinking behind that? Do you have a takeaway on that? Is it something that is constantly in flux? Can one brand move, I assume, only from the micro to the independent and not the other way around? But is that something that happens over time?
Absolutely right. In constant flux is probably the best way to put it, because we're always looking for the best ways to try and not necessarily try and define brands, but ultimately we want people to make it much easier to navigate around the site. And there are multiple different elements that could contribute to why a particular brand is called a micro brand as opposed to any of the other categorizations that we've got. I mean, yes, look, you've hit the nail on the head with Zeitwinkel. It's an amazing brand, and the guys behind it are just awesome. Full German silver base plates, like really high level of polishing. I love the colors that they put into one of their model ranges. Just and also when you get to talk to these guys, they're so accommodating and so passionate about what they're doing. That it's really, as I said, for us to give the best possible showcase. And of course you can, if you go onto all brands, then you can see every single one that we list. But to a certain extent, it's about trying to kind of break it down for people, a bit easier to navigate. And of course, things can change as I guess times change and considerations too.
No, I want to go back and hopefully, Rob, you weren't going to carry on with that particular thought, but I want to go back to something that you said earlier, Ollie, about accessibility. And you didn't use that word, but it was implied with, making Sartori VR or Anordain's another one that comes up a lot in the conversation. And the reason I'm thinking about this is because I read a commentary about someone who I enjoy reading in the fashion industry. His name's Eugene Rapkin. He basically made the case that in tourism and in fashion streetwear, there's been a push to democratize under the idea that, make everything available to everyone. That's the noble thing to do. But then you get a lot of negative effects where it's not really about the culture anymore. It's just about checking it off the list. And so I'm trying to think, on one hand, for a retailer, you'd want more traffic and you'd want more interest in watches. But then in the industry, there's been a lot of negative effects, like the hype pieces you mentioned. On balance, it might not be quite so straightforward. So can you speak to that, the effects of democratizing everything? Is that necessarily a good thing 100% of the time?
No, look, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. There needs to be, I guess, a level of a lack of accessibility. That it's just part of our nature that says, well, if there's something that you have to wait for, you can't have it quite now, then you're going to want it more. Of course, all of these brands, they're making watches in such low numbers that there's always going to be that element of that. But I suppose that the point that I would take is the inaccessibility might be there, but it's there not because it's been engineered in. So if you want let's say you want a Laurent Ferrier, the new Sport Auto 79, which in my view is just outstanding piece. And they say, yes, you can have one and it'll be with you in 6 months. Fantastic. 6 months comes, the watch arrives. Maybe a couple of weeks here or there, but that's how it will be. It's simply a case of, all right, you're in the queue, you're done, you paid your deposit, whatever it is that you need to do, and you will get that watch. It's the manufacturing of this inaccessibility that is, for me, is the problem. And I can give you one example. 2020, we all know what happened then, and the watch market, I think, changed forever as a result. And I had asked for a particular piece, a Patek in towards the November 2020. And I said, look, it's a relatively big sticker item. You need to kind of give me an idea here of how long it will be. And and I was told around 6 to 8 months. I said, okay, that's fine. We can work with that. And within 3 weeks, I got a message to say, congratulations. Now, of course, this is the reverse of what I'm trying to say, but at the same time, I think that the principle holds true, which is, this is something that you're planning for. Most people don't buy these kind of things on a whim. In my view, if at all possible, it's great to tie it with a life event, or it's to commemorate something or an achievement. Maybe it's for a loved one for a birthday, and you're thinking in advance, because it doesn't matter, frankly, whether it's £1,000 or 100,000. Said in most of the time, you're not just going to just turn up and just drop that kind of money. And it was clearly what had happened, reading between the lines, that another order had fallen through and this one had become available. And on top of that, of course, there was then the requirement that, notwithstanding the cost of the piece, that the sale needed to be concluded within a short order. And whilst, of course, I absolutely loved that watch, the way that it was done didn't quite sit well with me. And that's the kind of game playing that personally I'm not really interested in. I don't. None of the brands that we represent do that. If it's available and it can be made or it can be done for you, then it will be. Then that's what will happen. And this is the lead time. All parties in agreement. Let's go.
So you've got a lot of experience on both sides of the fence now. You've been a long-time buyer. You've bought from a huge variety of brands, from entry level all the way up to the very top of the tree. And now you've worked with customers. You know what you want a customer to expect, what kind of service you expect them to receive. Has any of this ever crystallized in the desire to start your own brand, or is it a case of the more you know, the less you want to put yourself through that torture?
I love that question. Has it crossed my mind? Yes. And actually, both Pietro and I have thought about whether there are specific editions that we'd want to create. We haven't really got anywhere near even formulating a plan. But what I do know is my genuine admiration for the guys, like, for example, like you have with Arconaut, and anyone who decides they want to really put their heart and soul into a watch. You absolutely have my admiration, because it is really difficult. And to distill your own vision and imagination into a piece, irrespective of whether you're doing your own movements or you're buying them in, but the idea that you think that you can actually create something that is true to what you want your vision of a watch to be, is honestly, it's amazing, and it's a really, really hard path. And I don't think enough people appreciate just how difficult it is to do that. And so, to answer your question, would I love to do it? Absolutely. Maybe in the future.
So you're not quite ready to take the plunge yet, and really, as someone who has been involved in very grassroots brand development projects, I can say you're probably wise for not taking that leap blindly, at least. But where would you go in terms of industry bracket? Would you start something small? Would you want to go for ultra complicated pieces straight out of the gate? Would you want to assemble a super team? Would you focus on design, horology? Where is your preference when you have had those discussions or those musings alone or with Pietro?
For me, I think the most important part of all of it is getting your design of your case right, first of all. That's I think is always going to be your calling card. Something that really stands out on the wrist, and that can be in any sector, whether it's in sports or it's in dress watches. That, as I said, distilling how you see a watch, how it should lie on the wrist, the kind of effect that it should have. Should it be under the radar? Should it be a little bit more edgy? the attention to detail in terms of how you're going to do the bezel. Is it going to be multi-stepped? That to me is that's where the real work goes in first of all, and then there are two sort of teams of thought, aren't there? One is that you start at the lower end with a simple piece that really just shows off your design philosophy. Alternatively, there's that plus, adding complication right from the get-go. And I've already mentioned Laura Ferrier. I'm fortunate enough to have modeled their Sport Auto. And of course, he went in right to the deep end and opened up with a tourbillon back in 2010. So there's no right or wrong answer, but to me, and again, I hope you don't mind me saying it, one of the reasons why, and obviously I've done videos on your pieces, I massively appreciate what you've done, is because your case looks unlike any other. Plus, you're having fun with it as well. And let's not forget that we can talk about serious watchmaking and the way things are finished and what complication and etc. But if it's not fun, then there's no point. And that really has to come through what you're looking to buy and ultimately how you're wearing it. This says a lot about you as an individual and ultimately, of course, you as a manufacturer too. So that's what I would say.
Very interesting and quite satisfying to hear that you focus on the case, because I feel that the majority of people looking to do something that gives off a creative perception, shall we say, in the entry-level bracket at least, always focus on the dial. And there's a lot of surveys done that suggest the dial is the deciding factor between which watch people buy. But I think that can be quite misleading, because I've always agreed with you that the case is the starting point. It's the footprint on the wrist. It's the thing that doesn't change when the dials do. I think the dial is maybe the decisive factor between one of many variations of the same model. But I don't think that you go for a dial without the case being exactly where you want it to be. Anyway, when you have customers come to you, when you talk to people at events, which I guess is probably the time that you personally interact with customers or would-be customers the most, do they give you the same feedback that the case is what they think about when buying a watch first and foremost, or do they often talk about the dial or some other element we haven't touched upon?
We're quite fortunate, of course, that at our events we tend to have some very special pieces, and so in all likelihood all those different characteristics would meld into one, and the appreciation of each individual one will be discussed. But the way I see it is, once you've got the shape of the watch, then ultimately, the world is your oyster in terms of, what materials or colors you want to put into the dial. And that's obviously a way of creating particularly limited editions, or, however you want to do it. But, if someone's buying it for the dial, then that's a great thing. But I'm not so sure that it is the key to the recipe to longevity, whether that's for the brand or for the model or both, because that is your identity. And I think probably the best possible example of this is AP in the Royal Oak, because of course it's known so well for that. The offshores are becoming less and less popular, but only as a result of the what appears to be a shrinkage in what people want in terms of size of watches. But the DNA is there. And when they brought out the code, a lot of people said, well, AP have taken 8 years to design this case. And in my view, I thought they were unfairly derided, because when you're looking at the design philosophy in that piece, in my view, and of course it's totally subjective, I think actually they created a very, very pretty piece. And to a certain extent, it was again, in my view, the launch pieces. It were the dials that let the watch down. The perpetual calendar aside, which was just outstanding and is still my favorite of that particular model. They were almost a little bit, even though they had colors, they just didn't really move in the way they needed to. once they corrected that, then they had the complete package. So I think that really is kind of, as I said, that design philosophy, allowing you to make something that is instantly recognizable, but again, caters for different sectors. As I said, all stems from the case. If you limit yourself if it's just about a dial.
I 100% agree with you when it comes to the launch models of the Code 41. I also thought the dial did not present the case, which I thought had a lot of nice callbacks to what had gone before in the best possible light. And also the name, Code 41, not great in my mind, not iconic. Does a name matter in your opinion? Have you ever found somebody not buy a watch because of the name?
No, I've never come across that. And actually, I think when you're deep in the weeds, as I think we all are, to a certain extent, having a completely random name that I think no one will have heard of is almost an extra bonus. What is that? Oh, it's a X. Zeitwinkel, for example. Tutimer is amazing. What their chronographs are just outstanding. We did an event with them at the end of last year. Really, really beautiful watches. 99.9% of people out there probably will never have heard of these guys. But you look at their pieces and they're just amazing. Andreas Streller's another one. I know that's kind of ultra horology, really, but just never come across that as a reason for not purchasing a watch.
So one thing, actually, the AP code is a great example of what I call a zombie opinion, which is that given the online discourse, someone will say something and then most people will kind of follow along with that. And all of a sudden, that's the reputation for the watch. And I think you're in a bit of a particular position because a lot of the watches that you would stock at the limited edition are polarizing by design. And that's fine for a small subset of people. But is there a way for watch brands to move away from some of these opinions that are formed very much in the moment and then are very hard to shake off down the line?
Oof, that's the problem with where we are in 2025, isn't it? And what social media can and can't do for you. Then I guess it's really about the courage of your convictions. And I suppose, again, using you, Robert, if you don't mind, with Arcanaut is, that's your vision and that's what you've created. And there are always going to be some people who deride it and some people who don't. I think the issue, I guess, with those brands, AP or Patek, is not necessarily the design, because you're always going to get the fanboys regardless of the brands you're talking about. The real issue, I think, is when you start saying, well, you can have a Nautilus, but only if you buy a code. That, I think, is the problem. But then that also goes back to the discussion in terms of falsely creating hype or demand, or not being able to say precisely when items are going to be delivered. If you created a timeless design, then you will be okay. It will come round. The people that make noise at the very beginning, in general, will fall away. And look, at the same time, even if you haven't quite got it right at the very beginning, that's what time is for. It's about consideration. It's about revisiting. It's about improvement. And you can always make things better. But if you started off with that sort of initial baseline, which, again, using the code as an example, in my view, they did, and then within 2 years had brought out the right kind of combination of case and dials to make everything sing. As I said, now I think it's a very, very pretty dress watch, and I'll be interested to see actually whether the people that did criticize it right at the very beginning still have the same view.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it gets right to the heart of the positioning of these larger brands versus the ones that you would stock at the limited edition. Because as you were speaking, I was reminded of another AP collection, which I don't think got a lot of love, which was the Millenary. And it's tough, right? Because people want innovation from their known brands, because then they can have their cake and eat it too, which is big brand, more innovation, but then people seem to spurn them when they actually try and do something different. Do you have any comments on that?
Could not agree more. And Millenary is I think is an amazing shape, massively underrated. And let's face it, you can pick up some of these incredible pieces on the secondary market for very, very, very good prices. And it's a shame, isn't it? They will get criticized for saying, "Oh, all you are is about the Royal Oak," or now Patek is all about Nautilus and whatever. And as you say, when you try and do something different, or you've copped it up. Well, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But they're at least they're trying to do something different. Perhaps we'll leave any kind of discussion over the cubitus out at this point. But at least they're trying, and I think using the code as an example, that's a great way of showing that the lineage is still sort of true to something that is an icon in watchmaking, but absolutely modern in the way of its interpretation.
So tell us about the event strategy of the limited edition, because you stock a lot of brands, you're online only, but you are active in the physical community quite regularly. How effective is that for you, and is there a plan to ever put a physical space somewhere in the world, probably London, I guess, for the limited edition?
To answer your question in reverse, yes, there is. I can't say anything at the moment, but it is, shall we say, sooner than one might think that we will have a physical space. It's going to be a really exciting concept. We generally can't wait to get it sorted and up and running. But all of it has always centered around the community that of really it's loyal and enthusiastic customers and clientele that we, and particularly Pietro and the team before I came on board, have really managed to engender. All the events that we hold, honestly, particularly over the last 2 years, I'm amazed that each time, regardless, that different brands every single time, whether we hold it at regardless of venue where we actually hold the events, we always get such an amazing turnout and feedback, and it's humbling for us because, as you rightfully say, that's really all about the connection that we're trying to make. And buying a watch, again, regardless of price point, is a big purchase, particularly in these times. And so the fact that people are trusting us with not only purchasing, but even before that, with advice, we're providing, I think, an invaluable link between people and the manufacturers, the owners, the founders, giving them the opportunity to be able to have a proper conversation with them, to understand what makes them tick. Is there aren't that many distributors out there who do it, and also, let's face it, the vast majority of the big brands, it's actually almost impossible unless you've got an order book as long as your arm and they're on first name terms with the board. So that's really how we've always emphasized the difference we can make, and so far it's been an incredible journey. Events every 6 weeks or thereabouts, and the fact that we've got our 10-year anniversary in September, where we were going to have multiple brands exhibiting. And yes, with the exciting pipeline of our own physical space, just looking forward to connecting with more and more of our community and our amazing manufacturers.
I'm absolutely sure that this conversation about having a physical space has been ongoing for many, many years, because nothing happens quickly in watchmaking in general, and certainly not when it comes to making the kind of investment necessary to tool up a location in one of the most expensive cities in the world to adequately service your clients. But has the presence, visibility, and success of the Time and Tide studio in London expedited these plans to move it forward? Have you seen that it's been done and you think, okay, well, we can do it? Or is it something you see as a necessary response to another retailer in the same sort of space? Or are relations very convivial between you and the Time and Tide crew, and you're able to use their space for your own events as well? What's the story there?
The relationship between us and the guys there are great. In fact, actually, Pietro and I had lunch with them just over a month or so ago, and that was the first time I got to meet them in person. But no, relationship absolutely great, and we had a really in detail a conversation about all sorts of topics. I can confidently say that what we're doing is not as a response to what anyone else in the market is doing. We have been looking for the right space, the right concept for quite a while. What Time and Tide has done is just phenomenal. It's really brought independent watchmaking, particularly within a certain bracket, shall we say, out into the open. And honestly, they've got our absolute best wishes. They're doing amazing things, but our sector and outlook is different. They have a particular way of doing things. Ours is in our own image. The kind of brands that we look after, there's a slight crossover in terms of a couple of brands, but in general, we're in different segments. So no, as I said, nothing really as a result of what anyone else has done. It was really about what's the right place, what's the right feel that we want to create for our community. How is it best going to represent the brand that we are at the limited edition, and what's the best way of showcasing the amazing manufacturers that we have. So, and I think that's really the only way you can do it. If you start doing things out of a knee-jerk reaction, then most likely you've already missed the boat and you have a problem.
What a great lesson for all of our listeners to learn, and a brilliant point upon which to end. Oliver, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure to finally talk to you. I know we've been trying to get this lined up for a while, but with you being as busy and as active as you are in the scene, working as hard as you are on the limited edition, behind the scenes for the most part, it's understandable why these things take time. We wish you a wonderful Geneva Watch Days and hope to see you there. And if any of our community have questions for Ollie or the rest of the limited edition team, then please get in touch via the usual channels and we'll pass them on to him in person. You can contact us via the official Instagram handle at therealtime.show, via the contact form on the website www.therealtime.show, via our personal emails, either Rob, Alon, or David at therealtime.show. And you can contact Scarlett via Instagram at Scarl in the Shire. That's SCARLINTHESHIRE. We'll be back soon with more top quality watch content and interviews with the industry's innovators. Until then, stay safe and keep on ticking.